accept annual report.
It is now 5 p.m. on April the 4th, 2023, and I call to order the policy committee meeting of the Belton Independent School Board of Trustees. Any public comments?
No, sir.
None. All right, let's move quick.
Excellent. We have a couple under 3A and B, FFAC and GKD. And this is future Dr. Mike Morgan, and we're bringing these back from our discussion last month.
Just to be clear, not medical doctor.
Not medical.
All right.
No.
I'd say to be determined. We're not finished yet.
So we had a good discussion last month. I have been working with Tyler over the past few weeks, and I think that we have addressed some of the questions, concerns. Some of the ones on FFAC were really from just kind of an organizational standpoint, making sure that there was clarity in what we were saying. The policy allowed us to do, and also making sure that we didn't have blending of the medical emergencies along with the athletic trainer part. So the first section there under administrative medication and medication provided by parent, there were no changes there, and I don't believe any discussion around that section. As we went back and looked at the subheading about medication provided by the district, we went ahead and put the on an emergency basis there. But as we worked through this with our health services staff, and there really was no situation where we had non-prescription medication that would have ever been administered in an emergency setting other than the non-prescribed, the unassigned epinephrine and the opioid antagonist medication. So Tyler, as we work through this, our recommendation in the policy is only to make that section about emergency basis specific to unassigned epinephrine, auto-injectors, and opioid antagonistic medications, because those would be the only two situations where we would provide medication that was a prescription in an emergency. You can see that we redlined athletic programs and moved that to the end of the policy as to not have that being part of the emergency procedures. There were no change to the epinephrine on campus and the notice to parents. The language around administration of opioid antagonistic medication, we kept the TASB language and let that under the section subtitled medication provided on an emergency basis. There were no change to the psychotropics or medical treatment section. That's been pretty long-standing. I think we updated that when Charlotte was here. Charlotte Smith was still here. And then we moved the medication provided by district athletic program at the end. And so I think we addressed some, and I would definitely like to open it up for discussion and kind of see where we.
I mean, you did what I requested, and it's clear to me.
Great.
Mr. Lord?
Yeah, just one minor typo on line 3.
Okay.
Medication provided by district athletic program. So the word program will just.
Oh,
Yeah, it's hyphenated.
Yeah.
We'll get that fixed to address.
Also, Michael, on that last section where it says see medical treatment below, I think we need to change that to above. Down.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that bullet as well, right? So the district has prior written consent for medication to be administered. I feel like, I didn't go back and look, but I think in other places we say something specific about like parent consent. I mean, I guess that's implied here, but.
You want to say parent? For parent or guardian?
If we say parent or guardian.
I think that's a fair ask, so.
But I didn't have anything else.
I don't think it will change the intent of the bullet, and I think it makes it a little more explicit in the final reading.
Continuity and clarity is what we need.
Does this provide that?
It does.
Did I hit the target on that?
Any other discussion on FFAC? I think it's a good policy needed. We're excited to be able to have the opportunity to have the opioid antagonists available if needed, and I think that's going to be a big step with some current trends going on in our society today to have that tool there if in the event of an emergency where we might need it. So.
Mike, you have the next one too, don't you?
I do. We can move forward with GKD. GKD is one that, like I said, we brought this one forward. Didn't have a lot of We wrote this one forward because we wanted our practice to match our policy. Obviously, that's the goal anytime you want it. So, wanted to go kind of through some of the things we discussed before. The advice or the guidance we got on the top section where we have the federal requirement to include Boy Scouts, we thought it might just be good to just say other patriotic societies. That could be any type of youth organization that we would not discriminate against if they did have a need to move forward and ask to use some of our facilities for their meeting.
You referenced the legal policy, I'm assuming, I forgot to look at it.
I looked at it.
You did? What does it say?
I mean, it references back to Boy Scouts and Title 36 of the U.S. Code. Yeah, it's all in there. So actually, what I was gonna say is, do we even need to put Boy Scouts here? Because if we strike, so after in federal law, if we strike all that, because we then point it back to GKD where it defines all of that. I don't know, it just still feels weird to me to single out Boy Scouts and not anybody else. I mean,
Well, then patriotic organizations or societies, it's a pretty broad term.
but it is very
It's
specifically
essentially
defined.
controversial.
But it's very specifically defined.
Will you
It is.
pull up
It is.
GKD legal just so
Yeah.
we can see that real quick, Erica? And I think we can project that real fast.
Yeah, and it's not defined, well, it's defined in GKD as listed, the organizations or entities that are under Title 36 of the US Code. And then I went there, I followed the rabbit hole, you're into the hole and found all the listing of the organizations. So Boy
Legal.
Scouts is there, Girl Scouts is there, like, yeah.
Oh, what's the history behind Boy Scouts?
It's, this was part of the Equal Access Act. And I think there were some schools that had decided that they weren't going to allow the Boy Scouts to meet because they didn't admit girls at one time. And so there was a federal statute passed that said you have to provide equal access, and it specifically named the Boy Scouts.
I see. Yeah, that's a bit odd, just to throw that.
It is, right.
So here's our legal policy and what it states there on patriotic societies.
Yeah, so like I would almost end that sentence at in federal law, period, and then see patriotic societies in GKD local, or GKD legal.
Legal.
And then we're not defining it in two places, it's defined here, gets rid of the weirdness that I have in my head for some reason.
Boy Scouts is in there too.
Well, it is,
Well, and that's what he's saying is, if you follow this, then you already see it, so why does it
Why
happen?
do
yeah.
that?
I couldn't, I was looking to see if I could find something that like required them to be named in like the language of, and I didn't see that, right? Now, don't get me wrong, very supportive, had a great Cub Scout experience with my crew, but,
Yeah, I was a Cub Scout.
yeah, just, I don't know, I think we can put the period after in federal law and then say C.
CGKD legal.
Okay. Moving down, the next was, we had a limited discussion around the for-profit use, the kind of clause we put in there, and it was really to allow, if we have club groups or whatnot, that, you know, instead of having them travel to Waco or North Austin or Austin to practice, that we would have the ability to do that at our facilities after they've been vetted. So, that wouldn't allow them to, you know, lessons or things like that wouldn't be provided unless we charge the fee. But as far as practice gym space, because it's so limited in Belton County, we want to have the option to do that if we can. So.
Has anyone reached out to you, Mike, recently about it was a local private school, I think it's Providence, about using facilities? Because they don't have.
I haven't
they
been
don't have
involved in
any
that
space.
discussion recently.
Okay.
They may have reached out to athletics or to someone else, but I haven't been involved in the discussion on that. The exception there is back to, we discussed this a little bit last time too, was saying that we don't want to say that individuals can't use our playgrounds or our play fields and things like that. However, if a group wants to reserve that, we ask they go through us, that way they would have a documentation that they had reserved that field for that time. Typically, we don't charge a fee for those types of uses because we don't have staff that has to supervise restrooms or make sure doors are locked or those sorts of things at the end of the night. I know that we had spoke about the facilities not available section where it talked about classrooms and things like that. We feel like the exception clause on page 3 of 3, where it says for use by any organization whose central purpose is supporting the district, if you did have your PTA groups, your project celebration groups, campus fundraiser groups, things like that, absolutely, if they needed classroom space to hold their organizational meetings and planning and things like that, that's something that the campus would absolutely be able to do. What we won't do as the district staff is rent those facilities out to non-school groups. So we would definitely, by putting it in there where it talks about any organization whose central purpose is supporting the district, that gives us an exception to those facilities not available exemptions. And then down for fees for use, I think we discussed this one pretty well last time too. It's just making sure that we've listed what some of those applicable personal fees would be: supervision, custodial services, food services, security, and technology services. And we have a list of fees and schedule of fees that's in our facility use agreement that organizations, non-school organizations, fill out and sign whenever they use our facilities. And I think the rest of this thing is the required conduct at the end. These are some of the types of things that could cause a revocation of use. If you don't conduct business in an orderly manner, using alcohol or tobacco products, firearms, those sorts of things, that we would probably revoke your facility use if those types of things continue with it.
Do you provide them with some sort of rules of using the facilities?
We do, and we cover them with them, and then if we have an issue, typically it's been maybe that the group didn't clean up the way that we expect them to clean it up. We call in and have a discussion with them, and generally, a lot of those groups that use our facilities are like through BCYC or Ralph Wilson Youth and some of those, and they're really good partners about helping us make sure and enforce our expectations on groups.
Okay.
There has been some limited times where we have had to restrict or even revoke privileges, but that's very rare. Usually people will either respond well, they'll follow the rules, or once we reset expectations with them, they do a better job.
Yeah, you, Chris, anything else?
Assistant Superintendent of Operations is not capitalized. Should that be capitalized?
Throughout,
Yeah, there's 4 places. So at the bottom of 1 of 3, third sentence up from the bottom. At the top of page 2 of 3, like in the first sentence. The first sentence under the emergency use. And then is the first sentence under fees for use.
They're in yellow.
Yeah.
They're all-
we'll get those adjusted before second.
Yeah, and I assume the intent in that, right, is, and the superintendent, right? I mean, we specifically named the assistant superintendent for operations, but
And
it's
I'm
not
acting
you
as-
exclusively.
No, we're acting as the designee of the superintendent.
You know, Mike, stuff like that, you know, like capitalization, I mean, sometimes I don't even say anything because I'm assuming that you guys are just gonna do that. Do you want us to?
No, absolutely. I think it was probably the version that came from TASB, the old language, Director of Student Services, was not capital,
Okay.
and the TASB recommendation wasn't capitalized either. Is there a reason for that, Holly, that as policies come in, they don't capitalize?
To me, they're titles and they should be capitalized, but
Yeah.
not everybody's on board with me.
I mean, it's actually your title, so.
Should be
Yeah.
capitalized.
And if you capitalize administration building, I felt like you at least earned capitalization yourself.
Continuity? Clarity. I think you cleaned up everything that we were concerned about.
Yeah.
Very good. So we can move this forward then, and we'll have the second reading coming up on the 17th.
I would say so.
Very good. Thank you all.
Everybody on board?
Mike, before you go anywhere, committee, are you okay if we have Mike stay up here and we'll go through a couple others?
Okay, sure.
That way he doesn't have to go back and come back up and go back and come back up. I think, Mike, you have CKC, if I'm not mistaken, correct, under item 4B?
Yes. And so CKC, really the only requirement that we're asked to put in here is to have a response to a nearby train derailment as applicable. We actually have already included that in our EOP, so that one won't be a problem to get compliance on. And then the last thing that came in the update was at the very end about implementation, making sure that the procedures to implement the security program are detailed in the district's emergency operation plan. That won't be an issue as well.
Is that in response to the recent train event? With the chemicals?
No, it was that we were already being asked by Texas School Safety Center to include that. If you had adjacency to railroad, to your campuses to make sure that, and really it's exactly what happened there. It's the idea that if a train derails and it has hazardous materials in, that you have an evacuation process and things in place to do that. So we had already been advised by Texas School Safety Center to have that in our EOPs. Now the policy has gone up to that and it's been included in the policy update. I think that was already a point of discussion prior to that, but it seems like now it's every couple of days there's a train derailment in the news.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that's in our EOP because we think it's a good idea that's not in here, right? That we should add because we thought it was a good enough idea to put in the EOP?
I haven't thought about it back that way, looking that way at it.
All right, because to some extent, right, this is the minimum, right? And if we can add more, but if there's stuff that's in there, we don't need to hold this up for that.
Right. You know, I think in the EOP, the big work has been work on annex stuff in the last year, and I don't know how specifically we need to get in policy about some of those things. I think some of the major events, I think, are important and covered. Well,
Yeah, don't hold this up.
no, but that's a good question for us to think through. Anything else on CKC?
Mike, on the permitted weapons, so we added weapons, it used to just say permitted ammunition. It's on page. It's the last page of CKC. 202.
Yeah, that's pretty much the people who have installed the Marshall programs and things like that. I think that the protection is that we want the firearm and ammunition both to be approved prior to them being used. So that's the recommendation is that we approve the firearms and ammunition that we authorize for possession and use under the policy.
Anything else, CKC? Great. All right, Mike, I think we're down to E, not EIC, FO, sorry.
So FO is one, it kind of is a crossover between student discipline and special programs. So the changes that were recommended in the policy update by TESB was kind of putting a note in there about making sure that the conditions under which physical restraint can be used for a student with a disability. So I did speak with our special program staff and executive director and director to make sure this is not only was in alignment with our beliefs, but it was also in alignment with our training and our practices, and they said that it was. So you can see that it did add there to, is in subpoint 3, to protect property from serious damage. That is a condition in which restraints should be used, and you can see that the deletion there from the policy update to control an irrational student was removed. So those were really the two changes. The other subpoints 1 to 2 and 4 remained as it was in policy prior back from 2015. The recommendation of special programs is that this does match our practice, it does match our training, and that they would recommend that we accept the recommendation from TASB to update it this way. And I don't believe there were any other changes to FO other than those 2 points.
Any questions on that one? Great. I think that's it for you, right, Mike? And Melinda's up for BBB and FNG. So this is again 4A and 4C.
Good evening. So BB Local is a policy that we will continue to update over time because it sets the years in which the terms and the elections take place for board members. And so this is simply being updated to add the next series of 3 years. So you see that in a couple of places. And then just a change from positions to seats for single member districts. At-large positions or seats was more appropriate for the G. And so with this policy, several of the changes are really more, I would say, syntax oriented. So just rearranging the order of sentences to make more sense. So if you'll see on page 1 of 7, just order in which the sentence is written was changed, and you see a little bit of adding the series instead of just having EF reference to policy. The one addition on page 2 of 7 is just being clear about complaints concerning disputes regarding a student's eligibility for free and reduced lunch program. It says it has to be the complaints in accordance with COB, and COB outlines what that process is. And then if there is a appeal to a decision made in accordance with COP, then F and G kicks back in and we follow F and G. And so this one just explicitly adds that item number 14. And I believe that is the only recommended change to F and G.
Any questions on that one?
Next. We only have two?
That's it. Thank you.
Now we get to talk about your favorite policy ever.
Yes.
EIC local.
And
And
Jen is
exhibit.
still here to talk about it.
Still here to talk about it, yes. You know, we talked about when you roll out a big change policy, then sometimes you learn a little more. And we did roll this out, probably had 2,000 people look at it, and 3 parents came to me and said, this policy doesn't accomplish what I think you're wanting to accomplish. And Scott was extremely great with math and realized that we limited level 4. Remember, so level 4 is the AP courses, and we said we want to take up to 8 courses. And those would be weighted at the highest level, which would be 7. And then at level 3, unlimited courses is what we wanted kids to take. We want you to take as many advanced CTE, advanced placement, dual credit, on-ramps courses that you want to take. The challenge in the calculation in that is that the more classes you take at level 3 mathematically, the more it pulls down your GPA from your 7. I can show you an example of that if you want to see how that rolls out mathematically. But it actually, pardon me? Do you want to see that?
I got the explanation last time.
Okay, yeah, let me just break that. Sure, absolutely.
Put that on you, I actually want to see it.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. The easiest way is for me to draw it out so I can talk with you about it. So we have 8 courses at the level 4, and that's 7.0. So then that would equal, let's just say 56 points. If we take 8 courses at 6.0, that equals 48. And when you add an average, your GPA is a 6.5. Okay, 6 and 7, there's the same of each. You meet in the middle, it's a 6.5. When you have 8 classes at 7.0 and you have a 56, and you have, let's just double that, 16 classes at a 6.0, that's 96. You average that together, it becomes a 6.3. Because the more classes you take at a 6.0, the lower it's taking your GPA. That's not ever what we intended or what we want at all. And so this parent had quickly figured out how they could coach their child to not take those. And that's not what we want, and that's really not what the parent wants. And so we listened. He had some great suggestions. Parents said on limiting the denominator, so controlling how many courses are weighted. That was going to get really complicated. We met with Skyward. Skyward creates calculations for this nationally, and they said, no, there's another way. You can treat those AP courses as a bonus. So what's in policy now, what we're proposing tonight, is that classes are averaged from level 3 down, just like they would have been, in the past you just average from level 4 down. Well, we'll average from level 3, so all your AP classes, all your dual credit classes, everything will go into your GPA. And then, once that's calculated, for every AP course you take, we'll add a 0.1 to your GPA. This one, it holds to the intent of what the committee want, what the board approved, which is we want you to take as many classes in your interest, but we'll still weight AP higher. It maintains the 8 courses and recognizes those. It also simplifies some things. So if you'll go back to some of our conversations that we had around, well, which AP courses will they take, and will, you know, which ones will be given the level 4 weight, you won't need to do that now. It'll just add on to a final GPA. So what you make in a class still matters, just like it always has. How many courses you take, all those things factor into your GPA, just like they've always done. But for taking AP courses, you will have an additional weighting. So for policy purposes, if you'll scroll up just a bit, we would eliminate level 4. So that would, we would eliminate that language, and then we would add bonus points. And that, scroll down in the red right there. So then this would talk about after the calculation using the leveled system above, so everything's been in the GPA, we'll add for up to the 8 AP courses, as was in the original policy, AP and on-ramps. We'll continue to do the up to 6 courses completed in the sophomore and junior years, and 2 courses completed in the senior year. And then each course will receive a 0.1. Because we're on semester weightings, it'll be an 0.05 for each semester, translating into an 0.1.
Regardless of their grade?
Pardon me?
Regardless of the grade they make?
It won't matter because you've already weighted their you've already calculated their GPA. So if you have a 5.6 GPA and I have a 5.4 because I made lower grades than you, it's already been factored in the GPA. Now we both just get a bonus point, so yours goes up to 5.7, mine goes up to 5.5.
What if they fail the class?
It's not weighted, and I believe we say that in here, but let me clarify that. That's a good point. We had it in our old policy, so I'll need to add the language in that bonus points grade, and I'll just add that at the end. Grades below 70 will not receive a bonus point. Good catch.
Was your, the parent that came to you about this, were they satisfied with your solution?
So when I called them, I said we found a different solution, and he said that would work. I haven't shared this. I wanted to share this policy once I gave you the opportunity to see it first, but yes, he did see that that would work. I was asked to review the 8 courses again. Of course, parents would like more. And met with our team again, and we still say that 8, you can take
Exactly.
You can take more.
all of them. You can take every, but,
They do.
and they do, and that's what I said to him. We want your child to take whatever meets their needs. When you look at AP courses and why 8, and I've really wrestled with that because you know, you want to just honor everything you can. But at 8, most AP courses are going to come into play in a core class, in the core area, in your math, your ELA, your science, your social studies. And most AP courses start, your sophomore year starts science and histories, Englishes and maths typically don't start till your junior, senior year. And you really, I felt like from our original conversation, really wanted to allow the opportunity for choice between AP and dual credit. And so the more courses we have in that 8 cap, the less number of choice kids will have into whether they choose dual credit or AP. And we have there's exceptional dual credit options available for kids. There's options for those courses to be to receive scholarships for them while in high school. So just really tried on this policy to make minimal changes based on what we had learned, but not to impact content that the board had studied for or you all studied for a year.
It seems easier potentially for counselors
It-
to guide a student.
They were very excited. I met with all of our counselors to talk through the change, and they were like, this is much easier. That's
And we
great.
don't ever want a counselor to discourage students from taking AP courses.
Correct.
Sky's the
No,
limit, take them.
and so for any of the parents that had, asked about this, I said, well, we're gonna work, through our board for these changes, but in the meantime, our kids are picking classes, and we still say, choose the classes that are what is best for your child and their future. And we are adding more classes all the time, and we really want to encourage kids to take the classes that they're interested in. I did make one other change under calculation, and it was simply to add the word "and" into a paragraph because that word was missing, and while we were already reviewing it, I looked at everything again and wanted to add that. One thing you need to know, typically with this policy, it is always changed, you try to always change it for an incoming class. You really want to avoid, if at all possible, changing this policy once it's in play with the class. We currently have our freshmen under this policy, and we are proposing this change while they are freshmen, so in that 4-year time. However, the changes are only impacting courses for their sophomore, junior, and senior year, so we feel good about that. It's not changing how anything has already been calculated, it's just providing clarity moving on. That was a question counselors asked, because they know, you don't usually change this then, so we will need to communicate this with parents, but it's not for any classes they've taken already.
We're changing it to the student's benefit.
And we are, and it would be, it would not be good to keep this. The alternative is not changing, that would not
No, that would not be good.
that would not be good. And so we feel like, that's the right move to make. And then along with this policy, we of course then also must update our EIC. And so, and so with that, we will update that chart to reflect that there will now be the 3 levels, and then we will address the bonus points. And as mentioned for the policy, it will also add that so we currently have in policy on the exhibit, no grade points will be given for a grade below a 70. I will also add in the bonus points area, no bonus points will be given for a grade below a 70.
And so on 3F5, this will remain, this part that says level 4.
So that is the old policy for our classes of our sophomore, junior, and senior. That's not the new one. So in this policy, because we changed it, anytime you change the policy, you have the language for the incoming classes and beyond, and then you have the old policies, and the old policies will stay in there until they roll out. And we can decide if it comes forward every year and you just remove that next class, or you just leave them in there since it's a shorter term, it's like 3 years, and then you can clean it up all at one time.
Good job. And also, yay, Skyward.
Yay, Skyward.
That's the
Yeah.
first time it's ever been uttered. Just being honest.
I really, because yes, that was not the solution that, had been provided was going to be extremely complicated and make matters very hard for everyone, and so we just, yay, Skyward.
Simple solution.
So it's still us, he modeled it after, there's a policy he was familiar with in another state that did the bonus point concept, and so we have internally tweaked it to meet our needs.
Thank you.
Okay.
Another lecture.
Yes. Yes. Any follow-up on EIC? If we make that change on the grade below up a 70, are y'all good with that going to the rest of the board next meeting.
Yes.
Great. Perfect. DC local, Mr. Schiller.
And just before you start, and it's going to the board as we discussed in a conversation, not through consent, as a normal secretary does.
So on DC local, this is regarding employment practices, and it really is just changing the authority for hiring of employment of administrative personnel on contracts from the board to the superintendent. That's the change that you see there in red. So we would grant authority for all contractual personnel to the superintendent.
I mean, we hire one person, and so it seems a little ridiculous at times that we are approving other folks that we were not involved in the hiring process for. So, I mean, that's what we hired this guy to do, that's what he hired the rest of you to do. I mean, it makes sense.
And truthfully, the impetus for this, we talked about this last summer, whenever it was, but the impetus for this really summertime hiring, it helps us out so we're not having to call special board meetings on some things, so. We'll still do public announcements of administrative hires and everything like that, but that's the impetus behind it.
Some of that is just, you become a rubber stamp.
And that's the last thing that,
Yeah.
y'all told me that when I
Yeah.
first came here, that's not what you wanted, and so we want to make sure our practices reflect that.
You okay with it?
I'm very clear. I think it helps us.
Yeah, you okay with it?
Thank you, sir.
That's it, isn't it?
That's it.
Any issues, concerns, requests for administrative reports? Nothing at all. Janet?